didn't, the whole world was going to collapse, and they passed TARP, which was ostensibly about $850 billion, nearly $1 trillion actually in reality. And then, of course, that didn't work, so let's pony up another near $1 trillion to do that with the stimulus programs, buyouts, and bailouts. They become emboldened by their failures, and they double up on them. When all failures grow to such an extent that they can no longer play the money-printing game and the taxation without representation game, the next step they take, according to history, is to take the nations to war. So to answer your question about what's going on in Europe, what's going on in here, about the looting as the societies decline, you've hit it right on the head. And to take it to the next step, it's heading toward war.
The United States has been almost systematically deindustrialized. And you've talked about this, Gerald, the fact that so many Americans are on drugs, including antidepressants. And it was very disturbing to me when they started, throwing Ritalin into the children across the country at very young ages, when kids were just acting like kids. It was for any excuse, slap Ritalin in their system. Are the drug companies, because we're going through this transition that the elites have planned for the United States, of course the buzzword is global governance, right? But as we go through this transition, are the drug companies acting almost as accomplices, either knowingly or unknowingly, in this transition?
Look at the great role that the drug companies played in Germany in World War II. What we have is a few, America has become an oligopoly. We have a few controlling, and they're all in competition. Merck is in competition with Shearing or whatever, Eli Lilly, whoever bought out, who's ever still in business. And you have the concentration of a few competing against each other. That's what an oligopoly is. And then when you have a few oligopolies, so we have the military-industrial complex. We have the financial-industrial complex. We have the pharmaceutical-industrial complex. We have the agricultural-industrial complex. That's what's going on. We have a few running everything. It's an oligopoly. And it is also very important to mention, Eric, the morality that I was brought up with and the God that I was taught to love and obey, it's against my morality to kill innocent people for harmless reasons, for things that for no provocative act. Having said that, just for the record, I'm a close combat specialist and have been in the field for over a quarter of a century. So I don't mind if somebody attacks me or I feel like they're going to. I will protect myself. So I'm not a pacifist. This country is fighting two wars. We have military bases throughout the country. If you want to talk about empire decline, let's look at that one that everybody's afraid to talk to or talk about. We know that we were told, the American people, by the Bush administration, that the reason we're invading Iraq and now occupying it is because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Both facts have been proven wrong. Whether or not they knew it, well, I'm all in favor of having the same kind of military tribunals that they like having for other people to find out the truth. If I could get arrested for pulling my car over on the side of the road in a country area north of Rhinebeck, New York, at 10:30 at night, in the middle of nowhere, and walking in the woods to relieve myself from drinking a couple of cups of coffee for an intent to pee, we could find out whether Bush, Cheney, or the rest of them have taken us to war for reasons that are not true, have ruined the lives of so many of our soldiers and the families because they've been mutilated, killed, and mentally destroyed. And now we're fighting these wars for fake reasons, plus we have this huge military-industrial complex draining the treasury. So this is every symptom of empire decline. Immorality, from Wall Street down to the guys that yesterday broke into a store and tried to hijack a guy in Harlem yesterday in New York City, and he pulled out his shotgun and blew him away after they pulled out their Glock. So it's from the top to the bottom. The country is becoming lawless because we have lost our moral compass. And without morality, you have an empire decline and destruction that we've seen throughout history, and it's happening before our eyes.
When I interviewed Jim Rogers, I want to stay on that point for just a minute, Gerald. He contrasted the last depression to this one and said that people in general were taught to have manners, have morals, and that in the country today in the United States, we don't have that anymore. We don't have that moral base or compass. So this time he expected tremendous disruptions and violence in the United States, essentially. Let's talk about the future for a minute here, because you've talked about crime levels that will rival that of a third world country, and you've talked about these boss nappings that we see in third world countries. What else could we see happen here?
Well, we're seeing a lot of it already. The ghost malls are popping up. The foreclosure rates continue to increase. Neighborhoods are being emptied out. Office buildings will be vacant. Office parks will be closed. You're going to start seeing more and more families breaking up, kids moving back home. Unemployment levels, as you well know, effective unemployment's about 19% now.
Yeah.
Going to Depression-era levels. And it's a very bleak picture. Having said that, and people ask us, we could point out the problems, what about the solutions? Oh, there are solutions. Solution number one, let the too big to fails fail. The economy has to correct itself. It's a self-correcting course. If you're going to talk about the capitalist game, let's play it with no exceptions. Will there be problems? Of course there will. What will happen? Well, when the too big to fails fail, the slack will be picked up by the competition. It'll create greater competition. And I say this because we don't need Wall Street. It's a fallacy. Wall Street's for the money junkies. We need Main Street. We don't need Walmarts. We need mom and pops. We don't need factory farms. We need family farms. Eric, this is not empty rhetoric. It's fact. And I say that again, being a political atheist, and our saying at the Institute is let the data speak for itself, is that when you look at that model, this was when America was the most egalitarian nation on earth. And now the gap between the rich and the poor is the widest in the U.S. of any of the industrialized nations. When we had Main Street and they were thriving, when we had mom and pops and they were spreading the wealth and keeping it in the community, and when we had family farms, and you mentioned about what Mr. Rogers was saying, about how we had a healthy community, in mind, body, and spirit, we weren't eating crappy corporate food. And I don't need any of these white shoe payoff guys that are wearing white phony doctor's coats to call you up after and say, Mr. Celente doesn't know what he's talking about. Hormone-laced and genetically modified foods is as good as eating freshly grown, locally served organic. I'm not an imbecile. I'm Italian, and I know what good food is, and I know what healthy people look like. And you don't get healthy by eating corporate food. And as you well know, we're the most obese nation on earth, the most overweight nation on earth, and talking about healthcare reform and feeding a system that looks like ours, it is unhealthy as ours, is just throwing good money after bad, sick people.
I want to ask you one more thing, Gerald. And this is not a political network in any way. We don't lean either way. We're just trying to get the information out there. But we were promised change from Obama, and he's come into office, and we haven't really seen change, or have we?
Well, of course, you know the answer. We all do. He brought in all of the Clinton remakes. Larry Summers. He's always the brilliant Larry Summers. He was the guy that followed Robert Rubin, who was, of course, formerly from Goldman Sachs, as Treasury Secretary under Clinton, who dismantled the Glass-Steagall Act that prevented the bankers from becoming casinos. And they also dismantled the regulations that prohibited stockbrokers and brokerage firms becoming these gambling casinos and creating all these derivatives and credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligations and auction rate securities. So these are the people that they brought back to fix the problem. Look at the Goldman gang, how entrenched they are in this White House, and the Citigroup crooks. From Gary Gensler, head of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, former Goldman Sachs guy, to Timothy Gheitner's deputy chief of staff from Goldman Sachs. I believe his name is Fallon, or Felon, probably. And you go after one after another. No, it's the same old gang. Look who Obama's Secretary of Defense is. Robert Gates. This is the guy that gets the prosecutors of the Afghan